There's a very famous book by a psychologist named Antonio Damasio called Descartes' Error. And in that book, Damasio articulates what he calls the somatic marker hypothesis. And the book is called Descartes' Error because René Descartes was famous for articulating a distinction between reason and emotion, and like many philosophers both before him and after him, thought that the reasoning mind is what led to good decisions, and that eliminating emotions from decision making was critical for rationality and rational choices. Damasio shows in his book that Descartes was wrong, that it's impossible to divorce emotion and reason. It's just not going to happen. He shows in the somatic marker hypothesis that emotion biases reasoning all the time. Now, what a somatic marker is it's a physiological affective state. In other words, it's in your body. It's a way that emotions manifest themselves physiologically. So when I was young, I got bit by a Doberman pinscher. So I was like 5 or 6 years old, and the dog came charging at me, and it didn't really bite me very hard, but it nipped me a little bit. And since then, I've been a little bit scared of Doberman pinschers. Why? Because Damasio would say, my body remembers that experience, and that experience triggers a physiological affective state. I hold what he calls a somatic marker. So whenever I see a Doberman pinscher, I get a little bit tense, or a little bit nervous, or a little bit anxious. And that's my body manifesting that physiological affective state. Now, somatic markers change over time. We're not destined to always be afraid of Doberman pinschers. I could have a lot of future positive experiences with Dobermans, and I could grow to love them. And I could change the somatic marker. Now, Damasio says almost nothing about interpersonal communication, but the somatic marker hypothesis leads us to a critical insight in becoming a better interpersonal partner or better at interpersonal communication. We constantly are producing physiological affective states in our partners, in our friends, in our lovers, in our girlfriends, our boyfriends, our parents, whoever. We elicit these physiological affective states because they experience bodily and emotion when they're around us. It turns out that in interpersonal relationships, if we produce more positive physiological affective states and fewer negative ones, that relationship is going to be strong and maintained well over time. We need to do our best to produce positive somatic markers in others. That's what makes for good interpersonal communication practices. To the extent that we're able to control these kinds of emotional predispositions or physiological affective states, we ought to be invested in producing positive ones instead of negative ones. This is why sort of dating gurus will tell you to go on a date with someone to an exciting place or something that positive that's happening, or an adrenaline sort of situation. It's because we might end up linking that feeling of excitement with our partner. And in early forms of courtship, when you fall in love with someone, those positive physiological affective states that are generated by the other person's presence are what you want so badly and what you desire. So a good interpersonal communicator thinks self-consciously about how to produce these positive physiological affective states, and in particular how to produce them in ways that outnumber negative ones. And in fact, there's a kind of magic ratio of, I think it's 5 to 2 of positive physiological affective states versus negative for a marriage or a long-term relationship to last. So remember, people are always having emotional responses to us. And if those emotional responses are positive, then we're going to be better off.